Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first of its kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
I've been thinking lately, it was a pretty heavy therapy week, and I had some situation with clients that reminded me of my own recovery journey in one specific area. And those listening, if you looked at the title of this podcast, Can I Ever Go Back to Porn? Steve and I already know that this probably elicited some alarms, some concerns, some like, what are they doing? The answer to that should be obvious.
I wonder how many angry emails we'll get before this by the time this airs.
I know. So we just want to be clear. We gave it that title, I guess, one to kind of elicit some strong emotion, just because this is such a raw and real part of recovery as well as betrayal trauma healing.
Yeah.
This kind of thought, this kind of question comes up a lot as we're working with clients, both husbands and wives. And so I just wanted to, talk about it for a second from my vantage point. So in my early recovery, I really wrestled with this. And it was the idea of, will I ever be able to be a normal guy again? How long do I have to keep doing these recovery things? How long do I have to, keep adhering to these, what my brain said back then, these ridiculous boundaries and restrictions?
Yeah.
Right? Like, can I ever go to a movie that has a sex scene in it and be okay and not have my wife freak out sitting next to me? When can I just start doing normal stuff? Do I have to always think about, when it comes to physical intimacy in my marriage? Do I always have to be aware of where my thoughts are and where's my intention coming from? Why can't I just be a normal guy? Right. So there was some resentment in that, but also I think as I look back, there was also some shame. I can't ever be a normal guy because I'm broken. I'm just a loser, perverted guy, and I'll never be able to be like those other guys that I see that don't have to deal with these kinds of things.
Yeah.
They can go operate a normal life and they don't have to worry about this because they're normal, healthy, good, right? Worthy, evolved.
Yeah.
But here I am stuck with all this stuff.
Yeah, that desire, that quest for wanting to be normal, I think is inherent to all of us. And, we all want to be able to fit in. We all want to, life is complicated, life is hard, and it's always more difficult when we find ourselves outlying in some area. Right?
Yeah, outliers. Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's sometimes I struggle with, I wonder for whatever reason, if God decided my life need to be one big outlier. I had cancer twice already as a kid when about, 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes. I went to the doctor for just like a weekly checkup and felt fine. Like things were great. They take my blood, they do the whole panel thing, because of my background, I do a little bit more of an extensive physical. Take my blood, they leave for a little bit. Doctor comes back, white as a sheet.
Oh, shoot.
And he just looks at me and he just really calmly says, "So how do you feel right now?" And I looked at him and I looked at my wife and I was like, "I feel fine." And he said, "Well, it has to be type 2 diabetes then." And then he proceeded to share with me that my blood sugar was like 525 points
Oh my gosh.
when it should be around 100.
Wow.
And he said, "The only way you're sitting here is because your body has become acclimated to that," which we'll talk about a little bit more here. And I remember after that, driving home with my wife, it really just hit on a trigger for me because I'd kind of dealt with this since my childhood, both with cancer and then with a dad dying. I mean, I just want to be normal. I didn't want to be the kid who didn't have a dad at campouts. I didn't want to be the bald kid at school. Like I didn't want to do any of those things. And now here I've got this stupid diagnosis that's basically telling me of anything that you enjoy, Steve, to eat, anything delicious, say goodbye to that.
Right.
Those things all go away.
Right.
And I called my mom on the phone and I just started sobbing. And I just said, I mean, I'm 25, 27, whatever at this point. I just started sobbing. I said, "Mom, I just want to be normal. That's what I want. I just want to be normal. And I'm tired of not being normal." So that makes a lot of sense. We are wanting that, but us addicts, if we kind of apply that to this, our stories here to that, and Mark, going back to your story, we all have become very, very desensitized, I think, to the direness of our situation as addicts.
Yeah, for sure. We're so in it in those dark addiction years that we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know what else there is.
That's been the whole normal. It's all we've ever known.
That is our normal, right? And
yeah.
Before we started today, you brought up a great analogy, right? This wandering in the desert, right? We're in our addiction. We were like guys that were wandering out in the connection desert, I guess you could call it. Just starved for connection to others, to our higher selves, to our higher power, being seen, being affirmed, being loved, being okay. This whole connection drought, and we're out in this desert, just dying of connection thirst, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we settle for coming upon an occasional animal trough. It's kind of
or like a mud hole.
Or a mud hole that we sort of fall on our bellies and slurp the muddy water and get sort of satisfied. But then one day we come upon this oasis, this beautiful, amazing oasis. And we're like, whoa, that's connection. That's this life without addiction. That's what it is. And it's funny because I have a really personal experience about that. So we have a local diner here. You can go in, you get an $8 steak. Steak's a steak. I mean, so whatever price, what does it matter? It's meat. It's cow. And one of my sons told me about this, this $100 steak place. It's 5-star crazy. He says, "Dad, you don't know. You don't know what I'm talking about. You have to experience." I'm like, give me a break. I'm $8 or $100. You're nuts. No way. There can't be that much difference. Well, he took me there for a surprise on my birthday with me, my wife and I. And I remember, I will never forget this. I'm sitting at the table. This sizzling piece of meat comes, this filet mignon that's like 6 inches thick, sizzling. And I could tell the smell. I'm like, what is that smell? And I took my first bite and I froze. And I looked over at him and my jaw dropped and my eyes were as big as, silver dollars. And I was like, oh my gosh, you understated it. And this music in my head, this celestial music is playing.
Eyes rolling in the back of your head.
Oh my gosh, it was the most unbelievable thing I've ever put in my mouth. And that's what this is like, right, for us.
Yes.
It's like once you've experienced that, do you ever want to go back to the $8 steak?
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, I look back on my addiction days. In fact, couple of years ago, I remember distinctly, I had an experience where, Mark and I have been sober a long time. I've been sober for coming up on 7 years, and I enjoy a life these days that is largely free of triggers. But once in a while, there kind of that perfect storm happens, and it could be anything, right? You're feeling off emotionally that day, and something just pops up online or whatever the case was. I can't remember what the trigger was itself, but I remember after coming across this trigger and this kind of set of circumstances, for whatever reason, it didn't pull me into a place of wanting to act out gratefully, but it pulled me back into that old mindset
Mm,
that I had as an addict, right?
yep.
Where I was objectifying things, not just sexually, but otherwise. It was this dark place of like shame and concealing I'm just gonna try and explain this, concealing myself from my own feelings. Like I could
Mm-hmm.
feel that disconnection internally setting in, where my brain was like numbing from itself, if that
From it.
makes sense.
Yes, yes.
Probably only makes sense to an addict, but and I went to my wife and I talked to her, and I hadn't done anything to bring this on, but I processed it with her. I talked to a sponsor. I went to bed that night and surrendered it, hoping that it would go away. And it was the first thing I was thinking about in the morning. Like this darkness had just settled over for a couple of days. And I remember talking to my wife, almost emotional. I just said, I don't know how I used to live this way.
Mm,
Right? Like how did I do this for 20 years?
serious.
I 2 days of this, and I can't handle it, right?
Yep. So true.
And
So true.
I've resensitized, right? We addicts, when we go through this recovery process, just like when we get into our addiction, we desensitize in a lot of ways, right? Our thinking errors become more pronounced, and they start to settle in. Denial, minimizing, all of those things. We just get more acclimated to the chemical influx of the addiction, the emotional downside of it, and we become super desensitized to it. But just like we can desensitize to things, we also resensitize to them. And even though that was the irony, right? This experience that I'd had was comparatively small to the sorts of activities, sadly, I would engage in with my addiction. But just going back to that world in that limited way was so toxic, it was unbearable, right? And I remember it was, even though it was awful, here's kind of the kicker. I remember thinking to myself, why would I? It was just another reminder, just like many I've had over the years, of why in the world would I ever want to go back to that?
Yeah. And I've had a lot of clients talk to me about that, over the years, and I felt this way myself. So you're in recovery, you're kind of
Hmm.
you're doing pretty good, but then you have this yearning to be normal again. And I used to ask questions like, well, can I ever go and, see an R-rated movie or a
Yeah.
PG-13 or a whatever rating that's got a sex scene?
Hmm.
What if it's not full frontal nudity? What if it's just sort of, subtle? Can I
Yeah.
watch that? Can I ever masturbate again? Have self sex just because I feel that, I just have this need to do that because it's just overwhelming me. Can I ever go back to that? And I had all these
Yeah.
questions, right? Can I? And what I discovered through, well, I would call it painful trial and error, because let me tell you, I tested all those boundaries in my early recovery. Well, I'm doing good.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I can go back to this. I'm like the alcoholic that says, well, I can go have a beer. It's not a big deal,
Sure. Sure.
or I can go to the bar and just drink a club and soda while all the other guys are drinking and I'll be fine. Right.
Yeah.
I can go have sex with my wife and I can fantasize a bit to spice it up. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sadly, I'm here to tell you it was a problem.
Absolutely.
And here's the challenge with addiction is addiction completely rewires us neurologically. And all of you listening who are maybe in addiction now or in recovery, wherever you're at, just know addiction is just a massive change of the brain. And so it doesn't take much in our environment or our thought process or whatever it is to switch all that back on. I
Yeah.
like to say, yep, the Vegas strip has gone dark. I'm off on this. I built this other town over here. but it doesn't take much to flip that master switch, and the Vegas lights come on, right, in full brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
Before I know it, I'm back in that place.
Yeah.
So I got to the space through learning through sad experience what wasn't working. No, I can't go to the bar and have a beer. Nope. It's like,
Yeah.
go see a movie that I know there's going to be a sex scene, but I'll be fine. I can just be neutral, and it's just all artsy fartsy, and it's not going to trigger me at all. Well, it did. Because then I'd
Yeah.
go obsess over it and fantasize about it and find, and if, masturbation, it might be okay for a moment, but then the next day I found myself headed back into that routine because of that experience. It
Yeah.
reignited that addiction wiring. It
Mm-hmm.
came back on, like boom, there it all is. So I chose to start putting boundaries on myself, things that I
Yeah.
didn't want to participate in. So I started going online. If I wanted to go to a movie, I went to websites that would show parents bad stuff that was in movies, so they knew whether their kids would see it or not. Well, I'm going there
Mm.
to see if I should see it or not.
Yeah.
That's just something I decided I needed to do. Um, with regard to masturbation, self-sex, I took it off the table because it wasn't something I could manage. It would
Yeah.
always take me down the addiction track again. Physical intimacy with my wife, I took certain things off the table in the bedroom because they put me down that old track, and I didn't want to go back to the desert.
Yeah.
I was so sick and tired of the famine of connection, of the shame, of the darkness, of how I felt about myself, how cold and selfish and absorbed I became, objectifying I became. I didn't want that anymore. I
Yeah.
call it standing up for yourself. I have a saying with my clients: hell, question mark, no, exclamation point. It's like, I'm not going back there. I like who I'm becoming. I
Yeah.
like this connection. I like this honesty and this new life. I like
Yeah.
it. And I'm not willing to even risk it in any form
Yeah.
because I want to go back and do some of those quote normal things. That's just a decision I came to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we all have to face that no matter how long you've been in recovery, right? There's always, I tell clients often, there'll always be two brain cells in the back of my brain somewhere that want to rub themselves together and say, geez, promiscuous sex would just sound great today.
Of course.
Like there'll always be that part, right? But when it comes back to it, what I always combat that with is I go back to a little bit of what we're going to do with the assignment here. And this may sound a little extreme for situations like that, but I like overkill when it comes to recovery. I think it's a safer approach. You have to kind of weigh out those pros and those cons, finishing up the second half of my story. So, after I got this diabetes diagnosis, I told my mom, I just wish I could be normal. Well, I went ahead and I lived normal for the next like 5 years. In fact, I ate like more pizza. Like I
Right.
had more like carb stuff. Like it was kind of my way, just like sort of just flipping off the universe, to be candid with you. Just like, I'm done being told that I'm the outlier again. Like, forget it. Now
Yeah,
keep
I'll
in
show
mind,
you.
I was not in active recovery these days. So now, so I was still dealing with all my higher power God issues. So I was kind of flipping off heaven as much as I was anything else. But it was just like, I'm not doing this. And then one day I started to feel tingling in the edges of my toes.
Ooh.
Right. And there would be days where I'd wake up and I'd feel just a little bit of numbness in my feet.
Mm.
And I knew what those were. Those are symptoms that neuropathy is setting in because of the
Right.
diabetes. And at first I tried to deny them, but those
Mm.
effects started to be cumulative. And thankfully, the two smart brain cells I had at the time said maybe I need to do something different. So I started exercising, started to lose weight. It was a battle to get back, but it's still a struggle. But overall, I live a pretty rigid style diet. There are certain things that, with rare exception, I will have, and some other stuff that I just can't. Period. And that is and that lifestyle, right, does come at a cost.
Yes.
It does. When I go, because the reality is I've had to conclude that I am not normal. I used to call, I think I've referenced it on this podcast before. I used to feel like some sort of sexual crusader. Like picture the knight on Monty Python with the big cross on his like chainmail. I pictured like I was this sexual crusader running around on this quest for the holy grail of somehow having all the benefits of addiction and all the benefits of connection.
Oh yeah, you can have both.
Right. And just like with the addiction, I had to, in this mindset, I had to put down my crusader sword and just say that just doesn't exist. I can have one, right, with all of the pros, I can eat whatever I want, and that's a lot of fun, but it will come at a cost. Likewise, I can choose this other lifestyle, and it does come at a cost, but it also comes with tremendous benefits. And I've been able to conclude that in that case, just like with addiction, right, the benefits outweigh the cost. In the case of diabetes, no raspberry filled powdered donut from a prominent company that recently went out of business and then came back, we won't mention it, which are like my favorite things, will ever be worth dying for. Right. No acting out experience. There is not a, Mark, and I say this with regret, we have acted out in many ways, in many circumstances over the years that would probably trump most people listening here. And what I can tell you is that there is nothing out there that I have ever seen that could possibly compare. Speaking on this side of the coin, right? This side of the microphone, this side of recovery 7 years in, that could ever, in a sane state of mind, convince me to go back to that smut.
No
ever.
Way. No
way. It's repulsive now, thankfully.
Yeah. And the assignment we're going to leave you with is, as you're listening, if you're wrestling with some of these questions, right? What can I do? What can't I do? Am I ever going to be normal? Is this stuff that my wife's requesting of me, is it reasonable? Do you feel resentment about it? Sit down and just do a pros and cons list.
Yeah.
What are the pros? What are the benefits, so-called, that your brain is telling you with regard to your addiction, that you want to hold on to some of these things? What does that give you? And then on the other side, what does it take away from you?
Yeah.
What are the negative consequences of that on the con side? And then once you've got that pros and cons list, right? Addiction and recovery, and on the recovery side, the various boundaries, things that you're going to, quote, give up. Then I want you to do a third thing. What is the ideal life that you yearn for? The ideal you, the higher you. What is the ideal relationship or relationships that you long for? Describe what that's like. And then take that and then compare it to your pros and cons list. Which one is going to get you closer to that ideal that you've now described for yourself?
Yeah, do those line up?
Yeah, do they line up? And then ask yourself, is the sacrifice worth it? Is what my wife is requesting, is it worth it? Am I willing to put that thing that I want to do to be normal on this, quote, sacrificial altar for the good of this wonderful connected relationship?
Yeah. Kind of circling around and finishing this up, we appreciate you guys all tuning in today. If I answering kind of the final answer to that question, can I ever go back to porn or to any of these other discussions? I mean, my thinking is I doubt it, right? I don't know that for sure. I can tell you that in a decade of doing this personally or professionally, in 20 something years personally, I've never seen it. But the big thing that I always say with clients when we have this discussion is, but why in the world would I risk it? Going back to Mark's example, why would I go back to $8 steak? Why is it, what about that would be appealing now that I've tasted of the full benefits of recovery and the connection and everything that goes with it? It's not that there won't always be that lingering taste, but why would I ever risk getting pulled back into that place? And that's the question that we all have to face in this process.
Why would I go back to the connection desert?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would I purposely do that?
Yeah.
But that's a decision for everyone to make. It's very personal.
Totally.
And we're not trying to superimpose our, autobiographies and say this is the be all end all. It's for you to figure out. It's
Absolutely.
for you to really do some deep pondering and work on as an individual and as a couple. So we invite you to do that.
Awesome, guys. Hey, have a great week. Thanks for tuning in. We will talk to you soon. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only.
This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.